good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be listening to this episode 14 of the Huddle UK podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, today we're going back to our division by division roundups. We're having a little look at the NFC South today, a division that, as we'll allude to quite a few times in this episode, is not one of the best in the NFL. Dumpster fire. The phrase dumpster fire at least gets said, I think, 5 times in this recording, and that says the state of the division as things stand. Of course, it's the Panthers, the Saints, the Falcons, and the Bucs who've won it the last 4 seasons, although one of those was with a losing 8-9 record. So we're going to be going through all the teams, chatting to the 4 Huddle UK writers for their respective teams, see what they thought about their draft, who they picked, last season's thoughts, and of course, hopes and dreams for 2025, keeping it realistic from Saints all the way through up to the Bucs. We are going to go in that order, in reverse order. Just before we start, quick heads up on this episode. You might notice my voice goes in and out at times. I've just come back from a stag do, and everyone who's been on a stag do will understand and appreciate how those weekends go. So apologies if the voice goes a little croaky or off at times. It's hard to hear, and just turn the volume up a little bit. There will be clips from this episode on all these sites as normal, over on X, on TikTok, Instagram, the rest. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and you can listen, of course, through the Huddle UK website, where all the online content, as always, is going up. Loads of thoughts about the schedule release videos up there at the moment, and all the NFL teams that will be coming to London and Ireland, and of course over to Europe for this season. So go check all that out. I'm the host, Philip Marsh. Thank you very much for listening. Let's get things started. Let's kick it off with the New Orleans Saints. Kicking us off is the New Orleans Saints, the team that finished bottom of the NFC South last season with a 5-12 record, a joint 5-12 record along with the Panthers. It was a season that started with so much promise. I remember writing an article myself at work saying this offense is serious after 2 weeks. It didn't end that way. Joining us is the Huddle UK's Saints writer, Steve. Steve, I imagine after 2 weeks last year with Kubiak, you were like, this is the offense. We're going to the playoffs here. This is going to be brilliant.
It was a dream. I had somewhere booked for the Super Bowl because obviously it was in New Orleans last year, and I thought, I can cancel it. This is probably a bit of a jinx. The first 2 weeks were some of the most fun I've ever had as a Saints fan. It was phenomenal, and it seems so long ago.
Yeah, with 9 months or so now, isn't it? It was it
Yeah,
the Cowboys? I've got to remember now, was the second week of the
it was.
season.
It was the Panthers Cowboys, and we demolished the Panthers, but that was half expected. You never know what you're going to get coming into the season. But the Panthers were pretty shocking. They certainly looked that way coming into the season anyway. Bryce Young wasn't really a number one pick. And we thought, yeah, okay, well, that was expected. The Cowboys are going to kill us. And that game was just phenomenal. It was just so much fun. I watched it on a Zoom with another like half dozen Saints fans, and we were screaming the whole game. It was so much fun. None of us could really figure out what was going on. We couldn't believe it. But of course, we were brought back down to earth with a bump not long after. So
Yeah,
1 week later, it started to fall apart. And I've looked back on it a lot and said, well, and everyone's looked back on the season a lot and said, okay, well, where did it go wrong for us? And obviously Derek Carr was injured a lot of the season, but it really started in that Eagles game in week 3. We lost Eric McCoy, our star center. And we still almost won that game. He went out in the first quarter, and we still hung on, but we didn't look the same as we'd looked for the last 2 games. We just about lost it, which was a shame, and then we just slid, and I forget actually how long McCoy was out in the end, but it was a long time, and we never recovered from that, and that was the start of our injury woes in the 2024 season. We love our soft tissue injuries down in the South. I don't know what it is, whether it's voodoo or whatever, but it was just one to another, and as I say, that kicked off the slide really. And we didn't win another game until week 9. Against the Falcons, which I'm happy to say I was in the Superdome for. I thought it was going to be a complete washout, and we came away with a win after Dennis Allen got the boot as head coach. So that was a fun time, but that only lasted a couple of games as well, and then we reslid. So it was a shame.
If I'm not mistaken, you got on the jumbotron on that game, didn't you?
I did, yes,
And I've got this
yes.
photo.
Oh,
I'm not sure I can do some editing wizardry on YouTube version, but if I do, it'll appear here or somewhere like that.
it was fun, and because I got on the jumbotron, I thought I'm going to make sure I'm because I was dressed up a little bit, as if you put the picture up,
Little bit.
I'm sure people could see. And I thought, yeah, I'm not taking this off. So we went out and I think we stayed out until about 6 a.m. and I was still fully garmented, shall we say? But yeah, it was so much fun. If you can win one game in a season as a Saint, you want it to be the Falcons.
And you were there. It was an added bonus as well.
It was a lot of fun. It was far better than when I went back in December and we lost against the Raiders. That was shocking. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And the Raiders aren't a good team themselves. I mean, they'll be an interesting team. I'm looking forward to doing the AFC West version of this podcast. As A, a Chargers fan, but B, that Raiders team now has got some spicy players.
really,
Obviously, Derek Carr now is retired. He's gone. I think
yeah.
the Saints have what might be potentially the worst three-way quarterback battle of all time for the starting job.
It's not looking the best, but we don't know what Tyler Shuck is.
No.
So you've got a lot of division. It was starting to come together a little bit now. Now Derek Carr's retired. Saints Twitter and Saints fans have come together a little bit more. There's been, huge division in the entire fan base, and Derek Carr and Dennis Allen were sort of behind that really. Now he's gone, which we knew he was going to be gone soon. We didn't think he was going to retire, and actually that's done the Saints a huge favour. If he's now not the most hated Saint of all time, he's not far off. He's definitely top five. But he has given us $30 million back this year. There was, I don't know, the draft was really divisive as well for us. A lot of people wanted us to take Shador. Personally, I didn't, and I don't know. It's really difficult to tell if a player is going to translate into the NFL. You look at Caleb Williams, generational talent allegedly, but he hasn't hit yet. Maybe he will. I think teams are very quick to move on from quarterbacks now, and they don't really give them a chance to develop. Give him 2-3 years, maybe a little bit more. Maybe he will be that generational talent again. So what have we got with Tyler Shuck? What we do have is a Super Bowl winning former offensive coordinator as our head coach in Kellen Moore. And for me, I will put every faith in him until he shows that he can't be trusted and isn't worthy of that faith. He's gone out and targeted this guy. Yes, he's older than all the other quarterbacks, but we know quarterbacks can play into their 40s. So does that really matter? He's certainly done everything right since he's got into the city. He's really, really endeared himself to a lot of fans, even fans who said they didn't want him in the first place. So we'll wait to see.
I got to give a shout out to our Bills writer, Jake, who's a good friend of mine. He sent me a stat the other day. I'm not sure if you've seen this one as a Saints fan, but Tyler Shuck is the highest drafted pick the Saints have used on a quarterback since Archie Manning in 1971.
Yeah,
They have
that's the only time that we've taken a quarterback in the first round of the draft.
And since that, you've taken 18 quarterbacks, one in the third round and 17 in the fourth round or later, which is a truly mind-blowing stat to me.
It is. It really is. We had, we I suppose sort of stumbled across a generational quarterback in Drew Brees, and there was never a plan after Drew. And I know we almost had Mahomes. But you can't pin absolutely everything on just a single quarterback. There's been other ones as well. Okay, Mahomes is pretty special. but they just never really had a plan for that, and it's a real shame. We've had some fantastic players everywhere else across the roster, but if you're not scoring points, you're not going to win games.
It still, as a Chargers fan, hurts my head that Drew Brees was the Chargers player for 4 years and then went on to do what he did for you guys. It's yeah, I know, yeah. Crimea River, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Saints, as you talked about, very divisive draft, went for Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle in the first round.
Mm.
That's now 2020, 22, 24, and now 25 that the Saints have gone for a first round offensive lineman. It's not shiny. As you
It's
said, it's
not.
been quite divisive and polarizing. Which side do you fall on of that argument?
So, I look at our offensive lineman that we took last year, Fuaga. He was an absolute stud last year. Um, we had Trevor Penning not long before that, and actually, Trevor Penning could still work out. He hasn't so far, but actually, last season he held his own. He looked pretty decent, and you start to wonder: is it the player or is it the coaching? We've had a proper merry-go-round with coaching this year. We're really, it's all new coaches. If your quarterback doesn't get time to throw, then it doesn't matter who you've got under center. You look at last year, we had so many issues on the offensive line. As I say, it started with Eric McCoy, but we were just banged up constantly through the O-line, and it felt, and I'm pretty sure it was like this, that every game there was a different offensive line, and you're not gonna protect your quarterback like that. I mentioned before, I'm all in on Kellen Moore until he proves otherwise. He's coming. He's an offensive head coach. He wants to bolster the offensive line. You're right. It is not sexy. When they announced the pick, I thought, really, look all the people that were there. But he's a great player. We've had a couple of people from a couple of players from Texas this year. He looks like he's going to be really good. And if I look at our offensive line with him in it, maybe we don't know where everyone's going to sit at the moment. I think Penning might move inside to guard. It could turn out to be a really good offensive line. So I'm currently quite positive about it.
Are there any other players from the draft you particularly liked? And it's not many weapons were added, it's fair to say.
No, we were crying out for a big-bodied wide receiver. Really, obviously we've got to have someone to throw to them. So, I still think there's obviously, since Derek Carr has retired, Saints got a bit of cap space. Mickey Loomis loves to spend. It would be good to roll it over to next year so that we can go into 26, maybe cap compliant, particularly if the cap increases as well, which we know it will. So it was a shame, but we might still pick up someone like Keenan Allen. He's still out there.
Stop taking all the Chargers players, I love.
I look, if they want to come, then. No, I'm positive about Tyler Shough. I think you look at some of his tape, and I mean he can throw. Yeah, he's a bit older, but I don't care. I'm really, really quite excited about was it the sixth round running back we took, Devin Neal. We needed we needed someone to line up with Alvin. Our running back room was looking pretty bare, so really excited about him. Also the linebacker out of Oklahoma, Danny Stutzman. We've got Demario, who's 36 now. That's a good really. It's old for a linebacker. He's no quarterback. He's still hanging in. He's still making the tackles. He's still moving around. But you've got to think that at some point he's going to drop off the cliff. So I think this was a great foundational draft for the future. It's not massively sexy. We know that, but you've bolstered your offensive line, and actually you've answered all the questions. You've answered questions at all of the position groups that we had, other than receiver. And we've still got the opportunity to do that in free agency.
I'm still a big Chris Olave fan. I know that injuries have plagued him, but the talent is undeniable for Olave.
He is.
Rashid Shaheed. I mean, the two of them. There was a point last year where they were on fire, as we said at the start. But
And then injuries, of course, hit. Alave, it was the concussions were really bad, and then when Shaheed went out as well, it's like, okay, who are we throwing to now? And actually, a couple of the guys really stepped up towards the end of the year. Um, our wide receivers held on as much as they could, I suppose, really. Um, but we haven't got a true X receiver. Olave's great lined up against someone else. He's a great route runner. Shaheed's speed is just phenomenal. But if you want to chuck it over the middle, and someone that you can throw it towards, and that you're going to get some yards after catch, just a few yards after catch, you're going to get a contested catch and come away with it. We don't have that.
off topic, just because it just came back to me, was it MVS who got the 2 touchdowns when you went?
Oh yeah.
Because they were
Oh
both
yeah.
absolutely
The
enormous
first
bombs.
the first one, I mean, we were in what, row 5, 6 or something in the corner, and it came over, and we saw it going. We were up on our feet before it, and that was a moment. Because yeah, that was his first touchdown as a Saint. Obviously, second one came not long afterwards, but yeah, he was a good addition for us last year. Was he a superstar? No, but he was reliable. He had some great catches, some good speed. So he was a good replacement for Shaheed, actually.
Yeah, I think he'll have some moments for the Seahawks this year because JSN and Cooper Cup's so good. Underneath, he'll have his chance to blow the lid off a couple of times.
Oh yeah,
Just to end, because I know the other guys I'm going to be speaking to, they'll probably have a bit more positivity going into this season than yourselves, understandably, as you already mentioned, in a full rebuild. I'm just checking the final results from the polls we had on the Huddle UK Twitter account this week. One vote, one solitary vote for the Saints to be the division winners in 2025. Actually, a dead heat in the end between the Bucs and the Falcons.
yeah.
You can understand where they're coming from there.
I absolutely can. I'm not expecting a lot this year. I think we know Derek Carr's not going to be starting now. So unless we bring in another quarterback, which I don't see at the moment, it's going to be, it's going to be Rattler or Shuck. I think most likely it's going to be Shuck. Let's use the year, protect him as much as we can, and see what we've got. I don't expect us to win the division. There is a part of me, and I will never say this normally. There is a part of me that really doesn't and wants to lose the division as well, because we are in that rebuild and we need some good drafts. And if we have a great season and Tyler Shuck is the next big thing, then great, I'm happy. Let's win more games. But we might need another quarterback. I don't think that we're going to get Archie Manning coming out in the 2026 draft. I think he's going to be there going to be in college for another year. So he's probably not going to be there. But the quarterback class next year is going to be better overall. So if we haven't got our next quarterback, then next year's a good time to get it. I don't know. I'm 5 wins.
I was going to say, how many
I think
wins would you be happy?
I'd be happy with 17 wins and nothing less. However,
Good point. Well, I'll rephrase the question. You make a very good point. What is the floor number of wins that would make you content on the season?
yeah, I think once we start going over 5 wins, our draft stock next year is gonna take a hit as well. The main thing I do not want is an 8 or 9 win season that doesn't win us the division and sticks us right in the middle of the pack drafting again next year. And that's where we've been for a long time. We've been in this win now mode. We can win. We're almost there. We can almost win the division. Your aim should not be to just sneak in and win the division. You need to be doing it comprehensively. So for me, 5 wins, I'd kind of be okay with, even though obviously that's going to be a pretty miserable season.
And I got one more question, and I'm only asking it because I know you're not going to want to answer it. Would you prefer to see the Bucks win it?
Bucks.
Yeah.
You don't even have to ask it. It's I no. I've been really really annoyed for the past 24 hours that the Falcons had a really good schedule release video. I think it was one of the best ones. So I don't want to give them anything, but that was a good schedule release video. That will not carry over to the season.
We're Team Bucks then for the division.
We are definitely Team Bucks. I'd rather, or the Panthers. I don't mind the Panthers winning.
We're going to get onto the Panthers next. Just quickly on the schedule releases. I actually wrote it in my HuddleUK article on that night because I stayed up to watch some of them. On NFL Network, they called the schedule release day the Chargers Super Bowl, which really hurt. Like that really hurt deep down inside. But then suddenly I was watching them all going, "That's not better than ours. That's not better than ours." Another win for the Chargers. Really. Anyway, I digress. We already touched upon it. Steve, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck to the Saints next season. And we won't go to the rivals next, but we'll go to the Carolina Panthers, who also finished 5-12 last season. Well, the team that I think a lot of people thought might come bottom of the division last year, although they didn't, it was 5-12 record like the Saints, who we've just covered, but it was the Carolina Panthers after an even more difficult season in 2023. Joining us is the HuddleUK's Panthers writer, Keg Wilson. Keg, we're finally getting to the Bryce Young, Dave Canales hype. We saw it at the end of last season. Are you fully on board with it?
I am, yeah, to be honest. I always have been. I've always been a Bryce supporter. I was in favour of picking him in the draft, despite all the draft capital that it took to go up and get him. But yeah, even during the rookie year where we went 2-15 and we were the worst team in the league and didn't even have the number 1 pick to show for it in 2024, I blamed many factors on that Carolina Panthers team, but Bryce wasn't the problem. Like in terms of everything that he had to deal with, he actually performed very, very well. Like stats won't show you that, and the win-loss column obviously certainly won't show you that. But with Frank Reich just being awful as a play caller, giving up the play calling duties midway through the season, then Frank getting fired, then play calling duties going back and forward, and the offensive line and the receivers and the general team that Scott Fitter, the general manager, put together, it was just a train wreck. So yeah, in terms of everything that I've just mentioned, Bryce actually played pretty well in his rookie year. If you go back and watch some film, he was not the problem at all. So yeah, I was really confident and looking forward to what we could do last year with going up in the draft, getting Xavier Liga in the first round, a few other additions as well. But yeah, things didn't go quite well at the beginning, and I was starting to think Bryce may be the problem, because after them first 2 games where we lost an aggregate scoreline of, I don't even know, like 70-something to 13, I think it was, and I was at that home opener in week 2 against the Chargers in Charlotte, and yeah, that I wish I hadn't went all that way for that game, I'm afraid. And it was the day after, yeah, I think he threw for like less than 100 yards, or maybe less than 90. I think that was 1 pick, and I don't even think we scored a touchdown. And yes, I think there was a rushing touchdown. I think Bryce scored a rushing touchdown, and then all the other points were field goals to that point. Yeah, it was terrible. I was in a Bass Pro in Concord, North Carolina on the Monday morning, the day after that. I didn't have any signal, so I turned my data on and found out that he got benched. I was like, all right, that might be the end of the Bryce Young hype train then. That's game over. So yeah, he sat 5 games out. Andy Dalton came in, played really well in week 3, and he showed how an offense can be ran. And it was like, right, okay, Bryce Young actually probably is the problem at this point. But then Andy Dalton didn't start playing well either. And then it was just an unfortunate injury to Dalton that gave Bryce Young that chance back. And yeah, for them last 10 weeks of the season, with Dave Canales getting his feet under the table as well, like I expected a slow start. I think he had a slow start in 2023 as the as the offensive coordinator for Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like that was his first year as a coordinator. Just came up from a positional coach in Seattle, and then within 12 months he's a head coach. Like, it was just a fast turnaround for Dave Canales. So yeah, I expected a slow start, and we got that. But I think we kind of needed that just to kind of smooth over some bumps in the road and just kind of get some people clicking. The offense, especially with a veteran like Andy Dalton, probably helped the younger guys like Xavier Leggett and Jalen Coker and Jatavion Sanders and some people. So I think in hindsight, it was probably a good thing that we got them kind of first 7 weeks out the way, where I think we were 1-7 at one point. But yeah, them last 10 weeks, there was some really, really positive signs. I mean, we won 4 out of the last 10 games, and a couple of them were really, really close. I mean, moral victories, you can take them sometimes. I mean, the Chiefs, we probably should have beat. And the Eagles, the eventual Super Bowl winners, again, we probably could and should have beat. And that was we lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in overtime in between them 2 weeks, where, again, we probably should have won that one as well. So we lost them 3 games, but as a fan base, we were like, we're cooking here. We just need a little bit more, just a little bit, maybe either a little bit more quality or a little bit more experience, and they could have been 3 wins against 2 or 3 of the best, 2 of the best teams in the league and the best team in our division. We could have won all of them games. So when a couple of the wins started coming towards the back end of the season, we ended that season as positively as I think this fan base has been since Cam Newton in a long, long time. So yeah, there's some positives to be taken, and another full off-season this year to get things again smoothly and a few more additions, some more quality and experience in the team. Then yeah, things are really, really looking up in Carolina.
And it was, I know you've written about it for the website, it wasn't necessarily the offense in those games. The Chiefs game, I remember watching the whole thing as a Chargers fan. I was rooting for you. Always like to see the underdog as well. I know I won't mention the Chargers because of your the fact you went to that game. I didn't realise you were there, so we'll brush over that. At that point, I was on cloud 9. I was like, we're winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I bet you were.
I'm like, okay, Canales, this isn't the Panthers anymore. We're flying. Give us the Lombardi now. I think you wrote for the website before the draft that you thought, let's just go defense now. Let's shore up the defense. How shocked were you on the day one on Thursday in Green Bay that they punted for a wide receiver in Ted McMillan?
Yeah, pretty surprised. I mean, I was calling out the picks as they were happened for the first 7 picks. I think they were all pretty predictable. I was saying them out loud and just before the commissioner did. So yeah, all 7 picks I nailed on. I think pretty much everyone else did, to be honest. I don't think there was any major surprises. Certainly no trades. I think trades can throw a bit of a spanner in the works. But yeah, when Commissioner Goodell got up on stage to say the 8th pick for Carolina Panthers, I said Jalen Walker, just as I think everybody else did, probably. I think he was the consensus pick, certainly among draft experts and analysts and Panthers fans alike. And yeah, I think if it wasn't Walker, it would have been defense, certainly. Because yeah, like you said, like last year, the offense actually ended up playing well for the first time in many years, and the defense played terribly for the first time in many years. I mean, even through the Matt Rule era, even that one year with Frank Reich where we only won 2 games, defense held up pretty well. Like statistically, we weren't bad despite how bad the offense. And that's why we were bad, because the offense weren't putting points on the board, but defense were doing their job. It's just the offense weren't helping out. But last year was a complete flip, I think, because offense was so bad in 2023. I think Dave Canales and Dan Morgan only had one job, and that was to get Bryce comfortable and get the offense cooking. And for that, I think defense was neglected a little bit, and we put up some historically bad numbers. I mean, that defense was literally probably one of the worst in NFL history in 2024. So yeah, the expectation that we were going to go heavy on defense in the draft was expected. I think we went pretty heavy on defense in free agency as well. I think Rico Dowdle was the only offensive guy that we actually picked up in free agency. So yeah, Jalen Walker certainly would have been my pick, as well as anyone else on defense, to be fair. I can't even remember who went directly after him, but there was any number of guys that I would have picked. But It wasn't really a massive surprise, to be honest, that we went Teteroa McMillan. I mean, I did mock him a few times. I did a few mocks where Walker went first, and obviously the likes of like Mason Graham and people like that were gone off the board. So I did mock Tet McMillan to be our pick once or twice, but in extreme circumstances, and mainly them circumstances were being that Jalen Walker was off the board. So the fact that he was still there, yeah, it was a surprise. I can't lie. But yeah, I think we made up for it if we're going to get onto the later picks in the draft. I think Dan Morgan really played a chess piece here and really done very, very well in, like, obviously, yeah, like offense played quite well down the stretch last year, but it still wasn't great. And there's certainly some improvements that needed to be done there. And one of those was getting like a true number one X type receiver who can charge downfield and catch however many long balls, deep balls, contested catches. We haven't really got one of them. So yeah, I think getting Bryce, that guy, to go alongside your Legats and Kokas and Adam Thielens and people like that, it's a huge, huge piece in our puzzle that we don't really need to worry about anymore. And then yeah, later on in the draft, we went and solved them defensive issues. So yeah, I'm really, really happy with our pick.
Yeah, 2 edge rushers on day 2. That felt more like what the Panthers going for. The only pick, which I think you questioned in your Huddle UK story, which I thought was really strange, was the one of Trevor Etienne.
Yes.
You signed Rico Dowdle in the offseason. I know I think he's a bit polarizing. I quite like Rico Dowdle. I think he's better than I think some people give him credit for.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
There are others who just, I think he got 1,000 yards last year.
He did, yeah.
It's not a bad running back. Obviously, the Jonathan Brooks stuff is tragic for him. It's so disappointing, even as a neutral, for a young bloke like that to go through that in his career. But then to go for Trevor Etienne in the 4th round, I don't know. That one was the one that for me stood out as a bit strange.
Chuba Hubbard just had his best year. He got over 1,000 yards and got a big new contract. So he was coming out of his rookie year this summer. So yeah, before the season ended, I think it was before the Germany game, actually. I think it was the week of Munich. Chuba Hubbard got his big new contract. So he's down for the next 4 years. Then we've got Rico Dowdle, another 1,000-yard running back. So we've got 2 1,000-yard running backs there, as well as a 2nd-round pick from last year. And I know things haven't quite panned out for Jonathan Brooks, which is unfortunate. But he's there. He's still under contract. He's got 4 years on his rookie deal. So, yeah, getting a running back that highly was strange. But I kind of see that, obviously, Brooks has been put on the PUP list for this season, so unfortunately we're not going to see him in 2025. So basically by 2026, he's going to be out for over like 2 years. I mean, it's a long time with back-to-back ACL injuries. Some people don't come back from that. Like, his career may be over before it's begun, unfortunately. So we may be looking ahead there. And Dowdle's only on a 1-year deal. So there's no guarantees that he's going to be back in 2026. So he might just be kind of like a plug-and-play type guy and may end up being traded by the midway point. So getting a younger guy in like Etienne, I get it. It's just maybe the 4th round pick. I mean, I think there was more things that we didn't quite get. Like, we desperately needed a cornerback, which we didn't address. We could have done with another linebacker, which we didn't address. I think we even picked... I think I've got it up on here. Let me just double check. I think Etienne went before... Yeah, he did. So, yeah, it was later on in the draft. So, another 4th round pick, Lathan Ransom, safety. So, safety was a major need. So, we picked a running back before even a bloody safety. So, yeah, that was quite surprising. And I think with Trevor Etienne, was he 4th round caliber, or did we reach there maybe? So, that's another thing. Like, we picked him above so many needs, maybe ahead of where he probably should have gone. So, yeah, that was my only really surprising pick, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not mad at it, but it was just more surprising than anything.
You've given it an A as your grade online. I don't think that's too unfair. I think, while a bit surprising, it's been they went and filled in the right places. I think that day 2 particularly, 2 really strong edge rushers. That's a really good way of going. And looking ahead now to next year, as you say, it was 5-12 in 2024. I put up a poll on the Huddle UK's X account earlier today asking who people think will win the division. Unsurprisingly, even though the Panthers have been improving, it's sort of trending upwards. The majority of the votes at the moment are for the Bucs and the Falcons. Do you think there is a world, though, where Carolina can pull off winning the division in 2025, or is it a case of trying to run the other ones as close as possible?
Yeah, both of what you said, I agree there. Like, yeah, there's a world, but are we living in it? I'd like to think so. Probably not, but yeah, give them as close a competition as possible, and then that's good enough for me. I mean, last year when we changed everything around and we hired Dan Morgan as our general manager, brought Dave Canales in, and backed Bryce Young, brought in so many people, like, what the previous guys did back to Matt Rule and Frank Reich and Scott Fitter as the GM and David Tepper being far too hands-on. Him taking a step back is probably one of the biggest moves that we've made in the past year or so. So yeah, he was just making a mess of everything, David Tepper. So yeah, with all of that mess between Tepper, Reich, Rule, Fitterer, there was just so much to do for Dave Canales and Dan Morgan. Like, it was like taking over like a burnt out building. Like, you're not going to buy a burnt down house and move in and just live with crusty walls, are you? Like, you need to build things up. Like, you need to spend a lot of money. You're probably going to need to knock the place down, to be honest with you. And that's what they had to do. Like, there was just so much mess that they had to do. If anyone thought that we were going to win that division in 2024 is absolutely off their rocker. And I did see that in some Twitter spaces, like, that people were quite high on the Panthers in 2024. I'm like, mate, come on. It's not going to happen. But so, yeah, we just need to build and develop. Like I say, it's going to take time. So even in 2025, I said this last year, and I stand by it, I don't expect us to win the division. But if we can improve, and certainly in 2026, be competing in that division, by 2027 be competing for the NFC, 2028 even, it's going to be a slow process, but we need to get there. So yeah, 2026, I just want to see some improvement. So last year, 2025, sorry. Yeah, so last year we won 3 more games than we did in 2023. So yeah, I can see us getting another 3 wins. So even if we finish at 8 and 9, that's a hell of an improvement on where we've been over the past few years. Like, that's going to be a bit of a statement from us, to be honest. But over the past 4 or 5 years, this division's probably been one of the worst in the NFL. Was it 2022, I think, Tampa Bay won the division with an 8 and 9 record? So if we get 8 and 9, or God forbid 9 and 8, if we actually get a winning record for the first time since 2017, that could be enough to win this terrible, terrible division. So there's a realm, there's a possibility. If we get anywhere near 8 to 9 wins, I don't think we'll win the division, but I think we can be damn close.
I was scheduling posts for later in this week about the NFC South, and sorry to double down on what you were saying, but I clicked on the GIFs tag on Twitter, typed in NFC South, just to see if there was anything that had all the 4 teams in it, and the first 2 things that came up were both dumpster fires, and that kind of...
Accurate.
Yeah, that's kind of some of what you're saying there. Who would be your pick then? It sounds like you'd be happy with an improvement season at 8 and 9, Bryce Young taking another step forward. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's there for the Bucs still again this year, or do you think maybe Penix is? I imagine you don't think it's the Saints. I think everyone would kind of agree that the Saints are in.
I don't think so
right now.
Yeah, but I'm not sure, because I'm not even that high on either of them two, to be honest. Like, I think the Bucs are good. Obviously, they've won, is it 4 years in a row now? 4 years in a row? I don't even know how many years they've dominated this, but I'd say in terms of domination, they've been relatively close to 500. Like, they've just been tipping the scales of win-loss records. Like I said, they did win with a losing record in Brady's last year in 2022. So they're not amazing. And I expected a lot more from the Falcons last year. I was quite impressed with the Falcons off-season. I thought they probably could have won the division last year, but there was just something about them that just wasn't quite there. And I do like Michael Penix. I think that last game of the season, our Week 18 game in I can't remember if it was on the road or at home. I think it was at the Falcons.
Was that?
Yeah, I'm sure it was in Atlanta. Yeah, it was a great game. It was really interesting game. I'm a really big fan of Bijan Robinson. I think he's a beast. They've got some great potential in Drake London if he can step up. Kyle Pitts has been a bit disappointing. And I wasn't a fan of the Michael Penix pick, to be honest, at 8th overall in the 2024 draft. I thought that was a major reach, especially when they just gave $100 million to Kirk Cousins. I thought it was crazy. But yeah, towards them last few games, and especially that last game against Carolina in week 18, I liked what I seen, to be honest. Like, for the Falcons, obviously I didn't like what I seen as a divisional rival. I was like, damn, yeah, I don't really want to be in the division with this guy because, yeah, I liked what I seen. So yeah, I'd maybe tip the scales to the Falcons, but I don't know. I haven't really got a set in stone winner, to be honest. Like, that's why I think it can be quite open. I think between the three of us, there could only be like 2-3 wins in it between all three of us. So yeah, I'm not really convinced on anyone.
We'll roll on an exciting season. Keg, thank you very much for joining us. Just quickly before you go, I know you've got your own sort of Panthers site, the Panthers Magpie, combining yourself being a Newcastle fan in the soccer as well. So if you just want to give that a plug as well, it's at Panthers Magpie, is it, on Twitter?
Yeah, at Panthers Magpie on Twitter and at the Panthers Magpie on Instagram. So yeah, just covering all the Panthers news, almost like fan debates and what have you on social media. So yeah, go over there and drop us a follow.
Yeah, go give Keg a follow, and good luck to the Panthers next season. We're going to be moving on now. It was the Panthers who were third last year. It's time to go to the team that was second, and the Atlanta Falcons. The third team today, the team that finished second in the NFC South last year, the Atlanta Falcons, a team that haven't won the division since back in 2016. We had the 4 years of the Saints and then the 4 years of the Bucs. We'll get onto the Bucs in a little bit, but to talk all things Falcons with us is the Huddle UK's Falcons writer, Harry. Harry, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks, mate. I'm doing good, thanks. I'm looking forward to getting stuck in.
Well, you've just had a good night at Aston Villa, your local football team, onto your American football team. Last season, I don't want to use the word shambles, but from the moment they drafted Michael Penix in the draft last year, lots of people were calling it a circus. The amount of money they'd thrown at Kirk Cousins, then to draft Penix. In hindsight, it looks like it might have been a stroke of genius. Where are you at on the whole quarterback situation and your confidence levels with Penix moving forward?
Well, honestly, when I was in America at the time during the draft last year, and when I saw Penix's name get read out, I was kind of frozen still, because you almost don't believe the Falcons can out-Falcon themselves anymore every year. And I think it was just confusion. Like, we've just thrown, over $150 million at this, veteran quarterback to then go and draft, another prospect. It was confusing, and I think it still is confusing. Like, no one can really lay it out on paper and say why that was a smart decision. Now, the fact that Cousins has obviously, I actually think he started the season quite well last year, but after that major drop off midway through, you could say stroke of genius. I'd say more luck. That's what I'd say. I'd say it was more of a lucky stroke than anything. But I have full confidence in Penix Jr. I think he's did well in his last couple of games of the last campaign. And look, he's got great weapons around him. If we can start the new season, well, hopefully this offseason gives him time to gel with his receivers, especially. And yeah, I think it's unfortunate. It's a big financial mistake. That's the way I look at it. Huge financial mistake, but we've somehow come out of it with our offense still in a good place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And then the Falcons, I'll get onto this in a bit, but for one sentence, I think they have some of the best, if not the best, offensive weapons in the whole game. This year's draft, at pick 15, they went Jalen Walker, and everyone was like, good call. A very obvious hole that they needed to fill on the roster. Maybe, he was surprising that he fell that far. And then Falcons being the Falcons, and I'm not saying that James Pierce is a bad pick and is a great player and I think will be a very good player for you. But you went to trade back up then into the first round. I've just looked it up here again just to make sure I'm not going mad. But they traded their 2026 first round pick plus a second rounder and a seventh rounder to go back up to the first round to draft yet another edge rusher. What's your take on it? Because I don't think this is as baffling as when they drafted Penix. But I think it was once again a bit of a head scratcher.
Well, when I say we can't out-Falcon ourselves anymore, I don't think we quite out-Falconed ourselves this time, but it was close. Because, if you're going to trade off next year's first-round pick, going to trade into the first round to then replicate the position that you've just drafted at 15, I don't know. Again, confusion. The front office has been confusing for years now. I mean, it just doesn't make much sense to me still. I'm still sat here presuming that they're hoping that one of them comes really good. I mean, hopefully both of them come really good. But as long as one of them comes really good and we get that edge rusher position, kind of sorted. Because as you can tell, our defense last year was just absolutely horrific. We needed to upgrade, and we've done that in free agency. I mean, our draft, I don't think any of our scouts even spoke to an offensive player in the lead up to our draft, which says it all, to be honest. But look, confusing. They're both great players. So in a perfect world, they'll both come good. But again, it feels like maybe that trade, if we're going to trade up for a pick, it could have been used in a better position. I don't know.
Are there any other parts of the trade, or sorry, of the draft? It was Xavier Watts, safety in the 3rd round, another safety in the 4th round, and then just there was only 5 picks in total. A tackle right at the end in the 7th round. As you said, the focus was on defense. I guess that's a good segue to move into the offense, because I want to talk about some of the players there. I'm known quite well in my friendship group as being a huge Drake London truther. I think he's a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. It's a hill I'm prepared to die on. When you combine that with Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts must be the most frustrating. He's frustrating to me, and I'm not a Falcons fan.
Tell me about it.
Your face just summed it up. If it feels like an offense, if everything clicks, the division is theirs.
Honestly, I'll pick up on a few things you've said there. So first of all, just to the back end of the draft, yeah, we knew it was going to be a defensive draft. There was no real shocks. We knew the safety was going to be in. So again, nothing was shocked. The only real shock in that whole draft was the trade up to then get the same position that we'd already drafted at 15. As for the offense, yeah, I maybe I would be getting ahead of myself, but I think that we've got an absolutely sensational spine of players there, in Robinson, especially Drake London, because I agree with you. I think he's absolutely elite. I think he's my mates get annoyed when I say it, but if I'm in the 4th and I'm throwing and I need a clutch up, I would want Drake London on the end of it. I know there's players that other teams would say and fans would say they want in front of him, but yeah, I think he's great. I think for his size and stature as well, the way he gets about is great. But yeah, just a real solid spine and a young one as well. I mean, that's what people don't take into account. That's a future right ahead of us. If we can keep building on that defense, that division is there for the taking, because it's a weak division. I'd argue it's the weakest division of the lot. Like the Saints are useless. The Panthers, we saw they improved towards the back end of last season. But I mean, that Panthers game summed up our season last year when we got toyed with. And I don't think the Buccaneers are anything to be shouting about either. So if our offense clicks, which I think it will, because we showed signs last season, and our defense, well, obviously it needs major improvement, but even just slight improvement, then we should be getting that playoff spot locked down. I'd like to think so. We threw it away last year. Let's not get it twisted. I don't think the other teams earned that playoff spot. I think we threw it away because we were, I'm pretty sure we might have been 6-3 at some point. Like we were pretty comfortable, and then we had that 4-game loss run mid-season, and we never recovered.
How do you think next season goes, or where do you think it needs to go differently? Obviously, not losing 4 games in a row middle of the season would be very helpful, and having a quarterback who consistently plays 17 games. But as you say, you were the makers of your own downfall last season. How many wins do you think it needs to win this division next year?
If I was being safe, I'd say 10, but it might not even be that. I genuinely don't rate the Saints that highly at all. The Panthers, like I just touched on, they improved. I'd be a bit concerned about them. And then the Buccaneers, I can't emphasize enough. We handed the division to them. We literally handed it. It was our division to lose. and that horror run in the middle. But yeah, I think 10 wins would be fair. I think that would get us in, and you can pick points of last season if you analyze it, of where those extra few wins could have came from. It's just last season was so frustrating, and I was almost happy to see the end of it, to be honest. And get ready for this season because we knew defense was going to be built on it. It was going to be the focus in off season. So yeah, I think we should, if you were to go in and look at all the teams on paper, wrap up the South next season.
Who do you think are the biggest threats then? It sounds like you think that the Panthers could potentially be as challenging as the Bucks this year.
Yeah, I think the Panthers could be a real threat. I mean, I know they were almost. It felt like they were the laughing stock towards the beginning of last season. I think a lot of people were digging in on that, but I thought Bryce Young came really good at the end, and we clearly know there's a player in there from his college football days. He hasn't clicked for a full season yet, but I'll tell you that considering how bad, maybe it's the illusion of how bad they were, and they were actually competent at the end that I'm falling for a little bit. But I stand by the fact. The bottom line is I don't think there's a threat, to be honest, in that division. I think it's more if the Falcons stay consistent, we play our game, we get the wins that we should be getting. I like our schedule a lot. Then don't be our own worst enemy like we always are. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if we're competent, if we play safe, we're not in a division, like either of the northern divisions. We're not in the East having to deal with teams like the Bengals who are like, could have a great season, could have a bad season. We're against three very, very average football teams. So hey, that's my take on it.
Where do you think the division ends up then if you had to right now rank it 1 to 4, 4 in 2025? I love these questions because if you get it completely wrong, I'm going to clip you up and make you look silly later. But if you get it right, I will do the same and give you all the props in the world.
You know how it goes. I'll put the Saints bottom now, then win in the division, have one of those freak seasons. But no, if I had to, I don't want to jinx it. If I had to guess, I'd go Falcons to win. See, I've bigged up the Panthers a lot now. You expect me to stick them second, but yeah, okay. I'll stick with my gut. I'll go Falcons, Panthers, Bucks, Saints. That's how I think it ends up.
Interesting. Harry, thank you very much for chatting Falcons. Good luck. I'll put my neck on the line. They're the team. I think the Falcons win the division this year, so I'll stick myself out there as well. I think it might be the Bucks who run you the closest. I like the Panthers. I got a soft spot for them. They were the first team I ever played on Madden. I know you said before we went live that the Falcons were your team because of Madden. I've actually got a signed Luke Kuechly jersey that's going to be up behind me at some point soon in the weeks to come because got a soft spot for him. But good luck to the Falcons. Good luck to all the other teams we spoke to. We're going to round off the episode now by speaking to Ollie and talk Tampa Bay Buccaneers. To round off the NFC South, we're going to have to go to the champions, the back-to-back NFC South champions. Although, as we touched on earlier in this episode when talking about the Panthers, one of those years was even with an under 500 record. Joining us is the HuddleUK's Bucks writer, Oliver Santos. Oliver, you must have enjoyed the last few years. I know you're one of the younger writers we have for the site. How did you get into being a Bucks fan?
So I have a great love for Florida. And from that point on, I think for me, it was just choosing the team. And obviously looking at the teams in Florida, at that time, I sort of started watching football. I think it was 2018, 2019, and the Bucks weren't doing too well back then, but neither was any other Florida team really. So that's sort of how I got into that. And yeah, just to be completely honest, I like the logo of the team quite a lot as well. I think it's quite a cool logo, and yeah, I love the area mostly. So more of a geographical thing, I think.
There's no bad reason to pick a team. I love a good horse racing meeting myself, and I'll go with my fiance, and she'll be like, I like those colours, and you can guarantee that thing will win. So, there's no bad reason to pick a team. But if you got into it around 2018, 2019, you've had, 6 good years, really, and a Super Bowl thrown in there to boot. As I said, at the top 4 straight years now. How are you feeling about next year? Are you confident of a 5th?
Yeah, I think there's always some sort of, you don't want to be overconfident. And obviously, for the second year in a row, we've lost our offensive coordinator. Now, two really good offensive coordinators that we've had that have now become head coaches of other teams, not too far away from the Bucks, and that we might end. Obviously, the Panthers we will be playing twice, but we might end up playing the Jags at some point, and that always kind of throws a bit of a spanner in the works. But I'm confident. I think we have a good team. Maybe on the coaching side is a bit of an issue, but I think in terms of the roster itself, I like the players that we have.
I was going to ask you about those head coaches, sorry, the offensive coordinators, because you lost both of them. Liam Cohen, who's now the Jags head coach, you wrote quite a bit about on the Huddle UK website. It was a really difficult situation involving him, both the Bucks and the Jags, wasn't it?
I was kind of following it on my phone just as everybody else was, and sort of really confused as to what was going on, because there was talks of him leaving, and then he'd agreed to stay, and it was reported by all the the reputable American sources that he was definitely staying, and then all of a sudden then he wasn't. There were reports coming out that he just completely was dodging the Buccaneers, and he had taken a secret trip to Jacksonville to convene with them. And I don't know. It was a very confusing situation, to be completely honest, looking at it as a Bucks fan. And sort of the way that I saw it was, a lot of people were kind of upset and everything, but he's got a good job up there, and he's obviously going to get a pay rise, and he's done some good things with us last season, and I think it's something that he deserves. But I do think that I wish he'd done it maybe in a different way, because it was a bit back and forth, touch and go, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there was a bit of underhandedness. It didn't feel particularly pleasant, but as you say, did a really good job last year. We'll get to next year as well. I know I've already asked you about it, but I want to touch on the draft quickly. The draft, I think, as I mentioned to the Panthers, right, and Keg earlier, they went for a wide receiver in the first round, which I think caught people a bit off guard. Maybe even more so when the Bucks went for a wide receiver.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that when I was watching the draft, I was watching, with some other friends that I had around, and it's the first time I'd really gotten deep into the draft, thanks to at Huddle, and I was really following to make sure I knew what to write about. And I was kind of the NFL guy, and I was like, oh, I know the Bucks, they're gonna, they'll take an edge player or a cornerback, and then when the commissioner said wide receiver, I kind of, everybody sort of looked at me, and I was like, well, they were supposed to take this type of player. But yeah, so a bit of surprise, but then you look more into the player, and you're like, okay, this is a good player that they have. And obviously, I was sort of thinking about the draft itself, the process. And when you draft, you obviously are drafting for this year, but also I think any good GM will be looking a few years down the line. And I think with particularly the selection of Emeka Buka, is that they were thinking of, someday we're not going to have, Godwin and Evans anymore, and someone's going to have to take their space. And I think as it did come as a shock, but I think it was maybe quite a smart pick, I think.
I'm a big fan of his as well. I was convinced he was a top 20 player, and he did just sneak into that range. And there's a lot of debate, isn't there? Do you take the best player available, or do you draft for need? I think there's a good argument that he was arguably the best player available when the Bucks took him. So, yeah, surprising on position, but not necessarily surprising on the talent. It went then, because I think the Bucks had the fewest picks in this year's draft
They
in
did.
the end. It was then cornerback, edge, and then finished off with a very, very, very small man
Yeah.
in Tez Johnson. I like that. I didn't know this, but yeah, I read in your story that the Bucks drafted the lightest player in NFL draft history, but then as an undrafted free agent, drafted one of the heaviest players of all time if he makes it into the NFL. I can't remember his name now. I'm going to have to do my research, unless you got it off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's a defensive tackle from Florida.
Devin Watson.
That's it. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
he's 467 pounds and 3 times heavier than Tez Johnson.
I think I worked it out. Yeah.
Yeah, which is absolutely insane. But a nice little tidbit from the Bucks is draft. The two cornerbacks feel necessary for the Bucks. They were good last year. They were very good, but I think in the playoffs as well and towards the end of the season, you did see that flaws in the secondary and in defense.
The thing is that, you know, people always see, and this is sort of things that I've written about, is that people have always kind of seen the Bucks as a strong defensive unit. That's always been the Bucks identity, you know, since the 90s, you know, the Super Bowl win, you know, against the Raiders, and then, you know, the strong one that we saw with Tom Brady in the past few years, and defensive head coach Todd Bowles, you know, it's pure defensive identity. And I think I was watching the Bucks last year, and having watched the Bucks, you know, 6 or 7 seasons now, and I was sort of thinking, well, this isn't the defense that I'm used to. And I think you're right in saying that, you know, the defense did let us down in a lot of games. And in a lot of games, it was, you know, the Baker Mayfield show and the offense putting up, you know, 30 plus points and the Bucks still losing. You know, it happened a few times. It happened against the Chiefs, happened against the Ravens. You know, it almost happened against, you know, the Cowboys. It was like, you know, we put up almost 30 points again. And it's sort of, I think, strengthening that defense was very important. And because the secondary was an issue. And I know that there was some debate, especially in, you know, Bucks forums that I'm part of and discussion pages. Was it, you know, the defensive line, or was it, you know, the backfield that was the issue last year? And I'm of the opinion that it was definitely the backfield that was the biggest problem. Although you could argue that one stems from the other, that because the defensive line is sort of less effective, then the cornerbacks and the safeties have more to do. But for me, the issue lies within the backfield, and I think we did well to address that with those two picks.
I'm just looking at the schedule last year. From week 5 to week 9,
It's a difficult time.
a tough time, yeah, for the Bucks, and they conceded 26 or more points in all but one of those weeks. So, yeah, defense it did shape up towards the end. One of the highlights of last year, Baker Mayfield was obviously very good. Again, he's sort of now coming into his prime, I guess, of why he was drafted so early on originally by the Browns. But Bucky Irvin is the new guy, isn't he? I mean, I love him. He's in every fantasy league. I'm trying to get him. I mean, I like Rashad White as well. There's no disrespect to him, but those two play a brilliant 1-2 punch now.
Definitely, and that's something that we saw sort of to the beginning of last year. It was sort of the game against the Saints where we put up 50 plus points, and you know they both had touchdowns, and you know, and I think that having a 1-2 punch for running backs like the Lions do, I think that's really really good, and it really does help because it means that, you know, I think like you were talking about Baker Mayfield, and I think although I do think he's a very very good player, I think when, you know, you put maybe a bit too much on his shoulders and the expectations become a bit too much, I think he can, you know, play a little bit risky. And I think it's good to be able to take that weight off his shoulders a bit with particularly Bucky Irving and also Rashad White. And because our running game has been a little bit poorer these past few years. You know, we were one of the worst rushing offenses the previous year, not this past year. And you know, we had kind of Leonard Fournette towards, you know, the back end, on, you know, hanging on to that Super Bowl win, and he was sort of putting up some poor numbers. And then, you know, we didn't really have much in the backfield, and last year that was a huge help, and a draft steal as well in Bucky Irving as well.
Last year ended 10-7. 2 wins to end the season, because it was close. It was going down to the wire, but of course the Falcons lost their last 2 games, so kind of handed you the division for a 4th straight year. What's obviously winning the division is the aim. That has to be the aim for the Bucks. I'm just going to quickly check in on the poll I've got over on our Twitter account. It's currently tied actually in votes between the Buccaneers and the Falcons. What is the win aim then? It was 10-7 last year. How many do you think is realistic, and how many do you think will be needed to win the division?
I think obviously you'd mentioned at the start of the, you know, of the program that, you know, the Bucks had won the NFC South with a negative record, below 500 record before, and that's not really something you want to be doing. And I know that, you know, the NFC South and the AFC South are often regarded as some of the poorest divisions in football. And, you know, a lot of people like to say that the NFC South is a very bad division, and, you know, like to discount even the winner of the NFC South. But yeah, I think, you know, we have a difficult schedule. It's not an easy schedule by any means. You know, people like to say it's sort of a middle of the pack schedule, but that's because it's based on last year's results. But for example, if you're playing the Patriots from last year and the Patriots from this upcoming year, I don't think that's the same team. So, we have to play some very difficult teams again. I think in terms of wins, I'd sort of tried when I saw the schedule come out, I tried to have a look at it and sort of think, okay, we're playing this team, is this a win or a loss, and sort of try and work it out for myself. And I kind of came to the same thing. I came to 10-7/11-6 record. And I think that will be enough to win the division again. Because I don't like to discount teams, outright, but I don't think the Saints are, going to be too good next year. I think they're still trying to figure it out. Derek Carr just retired. They're still trying to figure out everything, to do with their team, new head coach. The Panthers, I still don't think that they're good enough to be there. And, probably the only team that I would kind of be worried about is the Falcons. And although they did address some of their issues, I still also don't think that they are there yet. And although I think they will have a decent record, and they did beat us twice last year, but I would predict, and I think it will be a 10-7, 11-6 kind of season. And I think that the Bucs will most likely win the NFC South again.
I think that's the right sort of pitch for the Bucs. I think the Panthers could surprise a few people this year. The Falcons is a real enigma for me. I look at that offense and they've got players that I love pretty much throughout it, but they just don't seem to always get it together. I think they're the danger, though. I think if they do start clicking with Penix, that could be where you fall. As you said, you lost them twice last year, so it'll be interesting. Thank you very much, Ollie, for joining us, and a big thank you to all the other guests we've had on this episode as well. We had Keg for the Panthers, we had Steve for the Saints. My throat is almost holding in right to the very, very end, and Harry for the Falcons. Thank you very, very much. For everyone who's listened, remember to go follow everyone on social media, all the writers we've had on, if they are on the social medias, and us at Join the Huddle UK. Ollie, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. Good luck to the Bucs next year. I've been Philip Marsh, the host as always, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Huddle UK podcast.